Hello, everyone. My name's Melinda Jennison. I'm recording this Brisbane property market update for all of the data up to the end of the financial year, that is June 2025, June 30. And this is going to summarise everything that's been happening in the Brisbane property market over the first 6 months of the year, and specifically in the last quarter and in the last month. Looking at property listings, this is one of the biggest concerns that we have here in Brisbane, in that listings remain stubbornly low across our city. You can see their total listings between May and June did decline. That means there are fewer properties available for sale throughout June compared to May. But more importantly, the total volume of listings available for sale is still much, much lower compared to our long-term average. And that's very clear in this graph, as you can see on the screen. Sales volumes relatively unchanged across the 12-month period. You can see Brisbane declined negative 0.3%. So that's showing fairly consistent volumes in the number of transactions taking place. Buyer demand, though, is still very strong in Brisbane. Now, we can monitor demand based on how many people are turning up to open homes, days on market, auction clearance rates. Let's look at auction clearance rates first. You can see there the trend from April through to June is that clearance rates are increasing. Now, sometimes clearance rates are an indication of buyer demand, but sometimes if the seller's expectations move ahead of the market, which we have seen happening in Brisbane, we see a strong number of properties that are up for auction where there's a number of registered bidders, but the bidding doesn't meet the level that the seller might be willing to let the property go for. But that said, we are seeing more and more sellers and buyers align on price over the last quarter, where auction clearance rates have been trending upwards. Days on market currently sitting at 24 days. Last month, that was 22 days. So although the days on market indicator shows slightly longer transaction times, we're certainly seeing in some segments of the market, days on market is less than a week. So you do need to be ready to buy if you are in those more competitive segments of the market. 12 months ago, days on market was 15 days. So it has actually increased over the last 12 months. Let's look at dwelling values now. This combines both houses and units. For Brisbane over the month up to June 30, 2025, we saw dwelling values increase 0.7%. Quarterly, that put the growth trend at 2% for Brisbane and annually at 7%. So Brisbane's still tracking amongst one of the top 4 capital city markets around the country, and certainly in terms of the East Coast capitals, outperforming both Sydney and Melbourne on a monthly, quarterly and annual basis. Looking at PropTrack data, it also supports this trend, showing monthly and annual growth in Brisbane ahead of many other markets on the east coast of Australia. Looking at price segmentation, it is that more affordable segment of the market that continues to outperform here in Brisbane. This is the 3-month change in the hedonic dwellings index by Cotality, formerly CoreLogic, up to the end of May. And you can see that the cheapest 25% of properties, that's the lowest quartile of property transactions, have increased 2.5% over that 3-month period, whereas the upper quartile, or the most expensive 25% of the market, increased 1% across the same period of time. Now, this is dwellings data, so it does combine both units, townhouses and houses in the one data set. And we do know that that more affordable segment of the market is firing, specifically in the unit and townhouse market, and that would be contributing to this data trend. Now looking at the Cotality data for house value changes, we can see over the month of June, we saw Brisbane increase 0.7% across the month. That's actually in line with some of the strongest growth across all capital city markets throughout Australia. Quarterly growth in Brisbane for houses sitting at 1.9% and annual growth sitting at 6.3%. So the median value for a house in Greater Brisbane now is $1,010,000, 566. This is the second most expensive house market looking at median values across all capital city markets of Australia. That said, when we talk about affordability, what a $1 million budget will buy you here in Brisbane is still a lot more on a square metre basis than it is in Melbourne. And that is important information to dissect if you are a buyer in these different markets. PropTrack data also shows that the monthly growth and annual growth in houses in Brisbane is trending upwards, which is what we expect to see across both data sets. Looking at unit values now, Brisbane across the month of June saw unit values increase 1%. So again, that is superior growth to the housing segment of the market. Quarterly growth in this segment is sitting at 2.4% and annual growth sitting at 10.9%. So the unit market clearly outperforming the house market here in Brisbane, which has been the case for many months. Just in recent times. Median values for units now sitting at $718,196, and that places Brisbane as the second most expensive unit market behind Sydney, comparing all capital city markets as well. PropTrack data also shows unit values increased throughout the month of June with 0.6% growth, and annual growth also trending in line with that totality data at 12.9% according to PropTrack. Looking at property value changes in Brisbane for the house market and the unit market. Now, this is looking from 2020 all the way through to 2025, with those light blue bars representing unit value growth and the dark blue bars representing house price growth. You can see in that COVID boom throughout 2021 and the early months of 2022 that the house market really surpassed performance compared to the unit market. Then we saw interest rates increase very rapidly, and the house market took a much harder hit in terms of median value changes. And subsequently, we've seen strong performance across both segments of the market until about February, March 2024, when the unit market started to take off, houses became less affordable, and that demand shifted to an alternative property type. We're still seeing that unit and townhouse market surpass the house market in terms of monthly, quarterly, and annual growth here in Brisbane, and that's evidenced by the higher light blue bars here on this graph in that circled area that we've identified. Looking at 12-month value changes in houses and units across all capital city markets. So you can see there the house values have actually underperformed in Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth compared to the unit market, but that's not the case across all capital city markets around Australia. So Brisbane clearly showing very strong house and unit price growth compared to other capital city markets around the country over the last 12 months. And part of that is due to our very tight supply in terms of listing volumes at the same time as this heightened demand is in place. In terms of the last quarter, 3-month value changes show that Brisbane units are still outperforming houses, as you can see, but this really does show the outperformance in the Darwin market compared to all other markets around Australia. From the larger capital cities, Brisbane's still definitely outperforming most other capital city markets. Looking at vacancy rates, they remain relatively unchanged, still sitting below 1%. And you can see they really haven't recovered since COVID, where we've seen that tightening in the number of properties that are available for rent and tenants still finding it difficult to find a place to rent. With new rental tenancy laws in place, there's no opportunity to outbid other tenants. So we are finding that that's putting a cap to some extent on the amount of rental price growth, because when a property is advertised for rent, that is the amount that must be paid, and people can't outbid each other. So rental price growth in Brisbane in the house market annually still sitting at 3.4%, and unit price growth in terms of rents annually sitting at 5.1%. So the unit and townhouse market also outperforming the house market in terms of rental price growth or rental price appreciation over the last 12 months. And this is a trend that we do expect may continue simply due to affordability. Just looking at the market in general and our summary, the affordable segments and inner city units and townhouses are really driving the momentum here in Brisbane, and this has been supported by investor interest and first home buyer activity. Most first home buyer incentives actually cut out at a threshold of $700,000 in Brisbane. You'll note from this update that the median unit value has now surpassed that $700,000 price point. So a lot of those first home buyers are really competitive in that market up to that threshold point. The unit market continues to lead growth with 1% rise in June and 10.9% annual growth. So this is well in excess of the growth that we've experienced in the house market. And there's been strong demand from downsizers for prestige units in the inner city locations, and professionals also wanting access to lifestyle hubs. Obviously, we've seen inflation falling over the last quarter, it's sitting at 2.1%. We've got strong job vacancies in Queensland, meaning we've got full employment and very strong employment. And we do have those anticipated interest rate cuts, and these are boosting buyer sentiment and increasing demand for property here throughout the southeast pocket of Queensland. We've seen the Boost to Buy scheme come into place and first homeowner grant extensions, and these are also increasing the demand across that buyer segment. As I said, a lot of those thresholds cutting out above that $700,000 price point. So that's where the demand is sitting in terms of that more affordable segment of the market. I hope that's been a helpful monthly update. If you'd like to connect with us, you can scan this QR code. We have some free resources available to those that follow our content. Alternatively, you can book a call with our team through this link, or alternatively, head to our website at streamlineproperty.com.au for further information in relation to what's happening here in Brisbane. We look forward to speaking with you again next month. Bye for now.